Well, hey there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast, where senior leaders come to think and rethink about how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch. I'm your Talent Sherpa, and I'd like to welcome my friend and co-host, Scott Morris. Scott's a seasoned CHRO, an entrepreneur, and founder of Propulsion AI. That's the AI-powered coaching platform built for scaling leaders and teams. So, Scott, let's dive in. And today we're going to talk about one of those HR sacred cows. You know, the kind of thing that people nod knowingly about in meetings, even though they're secretly thinking, are we so sure we should be doing this? Yep, I'm talking about engagement scores. So here's a scenario that you probably recognize. You walk into a quarterly review. Everyone is looking sharp. The coffee is strong. The graphs are colorful. And suddenly the room goes quiet as the HR leader proudly reveals employee engagement is up 2 points this quarter. And everyone claps politely, the CEO nods approvingly, and everyone moves on to revenue numbers like something meaningful just happened. But here's the question we're asking today. Did something meaningful actually happen? Or have we just gotten really good at playing a game that, I don't know, might not be even the right game to be playing? Scott, what's your take?
I can't wait to have this conversation. You know how fired up I get about this topic, and hate is always too strong of a word for anything, but I'll tell you my emotion around engagement surveys gets pretty close to that. We think about them wrong. We don't define things right. We use them incorrectly. And I think you just made probably the most important point that we are going to have in the entire episode. And that is we're not connecting to business outcomes. We're thinking about other things. And there are a bunch of stuff that I think we should pull apart in this. Can we start with just definitions? How do you even define this term?
Yeah, I think engagement is the application of discretionary effort without anybody asking you to do so. It shows that you're tied in with a purpose. It shows that you're tied in with the business outcomes, and you take a personal ownership and pride in it. The challenge is that's not what most engagement surveys measure.
100% right. And, you know, you made it really, really simple. The word I hear when I listen to you talk is commitment. How committed are you to the organization, to its goals? How dedicated are you to going beyond just the confines of your job? And how motivated are you to help the organization reach its objectives? And funny enough, for all of the weird questions that we ask in engagement surveys, we just lose sight of that very simple thing.
Yeah, we ask, are you happy? We tend to take over 100 different questions to do so. We probably have 15 questions about working safely, which all the folks in the office make fun of. We end up thinking about, kind of survey over survey impact and motion to it. But the real question is, like, how do you build one that works? Now, I will lean into this. I am a Q12 lifer and truther. That is a organization that I started playing with back in the late 90s before most people here were born. And I got a chance to work with Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman when we were rolling out the first Q12 survey. So I'm one of those weird folks that you probably have never met anyone like me. I read the meta-analysis that linked the questions on the Q12 to the business outcomes. And if you'd like to talk about the R squared and how they tie in together, I can probably remember a few of the key ones. But it's based on that experience that I have looked very skeptically at almost every survey that I've seen done since. And the specific reason is most surveys are built with feel-good questions. They're not built on real business outcomes.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there is a connection, and where my objection to this starts is what you've got your finger on right now, is that we don't really differentiate between satisfaction or happiness and engagement. What's the relationship?
I think if you are fully engaged, it means that you're tied to the purpose and you feel an ownership of the actions that you're taking. You are tied into the mission. When you are tied into the mission, when you are fully engaged, when you feel connected to the purpose, you tend to be much more satisfied with the work that you're doing. You might actually work more. You might work harder. You might do harder things. You might might spend more time in the muck, but you have a much better sense of, I am doing something that matters, and that drives satisfaction. Now let's flip it. The flip side is, can you be satisfied and not be performing or contributing at a high level 6 days a week and twice on Sunday?
Right. Yeah, it's a matter of directionality. You are going to be satisfied if you are engaged, but you can have satisfied people that aren't engaged. And we know that that's important. The work that Towers Watson has done showed us that fully engaged employees tend to produce 16% more than we pay them. Fully disengaged employees, only about 60% of their payroll value. And the worst part about this, and you say Q12, right? Gallup says only about 31% of the world's work population is engaged. And that's a huge disengagement number, and it's getting worse.
Yeah, well, I'll push back on the getting worse. I think it absolutely is a very low number, but I actually looked at when they brought out the 25 survey. It's low, but it's still going higher, but it's just not that
The rate,
meaningful.
yeah, the rate of change is not a meaningful rate of change. Right.
Yeah, that's true. And by the way, what you just said is how Gallup kind of talked about their assessment and the results from this worldwide accumulation of all the worldwide surveys, but it actually doesn't match the underlying data. But one of the other challenges I have with engagement surveys broadly is I don't know what you do with most of them. So if you have one that is tied in with satisfaction, then you're saying, I enjoy working here. I feel good about my manager, things like that. What do you do with that? What do you do with that information versus what's the first question on the Q12? I know what's expected of me at work. I know exactly what to do if that number's low. And oh, by the way, if that number is low, nothing else matters.
That's right. I actually think, you've asked me this question before in the past, and the question is like, what's the longest engagement survey that you've seen? And I know you've dealt with some that are 100 questions. I think the one, like, I've made every mistake possible, by the way, in engagement surveys. I've done all of the stupid things that I rail against, and I think I rail against them because I recognized how foolish my actions were, including trying to pack like 60 or 70 questions into a survey. And I made myself feel better about it by saying we would break it apart and we'll do these questions in this quarter and these questions in this quarter. But here's something that I'd love your opinion on. I think you can get away with 5 or 6 questions. I think that's it. And I think you started it right there. Do you fully understand the expectations that the company has for you performing your job? Does your boss understand how your role fits into the broader strategy? Are you measured in a fair and objective way against those? Right? It's questions like that that are going to really matter. And I think you can do 5 or 6 of them and be done.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I like the "I know what is expected of me at work" question, it's literally a diagnostic sledgehammer because it requires so many things to be going well in it. And you talked about 2 or 3 of them. The specific outcomes that are tied to my role, that's a big part of it. But you know what else it measures? It measures whether, as an organization, the expectations of me are well known to those people that I interact with in a process up and down the street. When I see the numbers going low in companies I've been supportive of, and we literally focus only on that question until we get it into the 75th percentile. I find this phase 1 of making improvement on that is making sure the manager employee understanding of the outcomes is in place. That normally gets us to about average. The second piece is, now let's talk about all the people that you're interacting with. So think about an HR compensation person. The head of total rewards might get the director of compensation fully aligned on what they're doing, but there are expectations of what that compensation director needs to be delivering to the field, and those field leaders need to have similar set of expectations that are there. And so that's how you move it from kind of the 50th to the 75th. But the key thing, coming all the way back to it, is really focuses on performance, not emotions. And most of the surveys that I've seen out there, and I've worked for some great companies who had very, very well credentialed internal or industrial psychology types that are doing like PhD work and doing wonderful things. they still don't get to the clarity that comes with, I know what's expected of me at work. And when you
Yeah.
get done with that, then like I have the tools I need to do my job at a high level. And then somebody is giving me feedback about my performance on a regular basis, and I have the ability to do my best work every day, and my company's mission feels makes me feel good about what I'm doing. I butchered some of the language, but those are the 5 questions. Like none of the other things matter until you get those things right.
And I think the reason, like, to make it painfully obvious, the reason is that if you don't understand your job, if your boss doesn't understand your job, if you both don't see how that role is contributing in a meaningful way to business outcomes, then it's impossible to get back to that very simple, straightforward definition that we just covered a minute ago, which is you've got an emotional commitment to the organization. If you're unclear about what you're driving on behalf of the organization, it's impossible to be committed to it. If you're unclear about how your daily activities are responsible for outcomes that matter, it's entirely impossible to be dedicated to going above and beyond that because you don't get the basis of it. And that's why I think the 6 question survey is where every organization ought to be, because what we're really talking about is role design, role clarity. And when you have that, not only now can you have engagement, but you have an entirely different set of management principles that come with that, because you start managing to the numbers, you start driving satisfaction through outcomes and not tasks and feelings.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And now let's pivot a little bit in terms of one of the other challenges I have with most surveys out there, and that is the timing of when you do it and the gamesmanship that's associated with it. Right. The thing I like about your 6 question survey or Gallup's Q12, which is actually 13 because they kind of sold out and added an employee net promoter score on top of it. But it's called question zero. So they still have 12 as far as their math is concerned. One of the challenges I think with having large surveys is that you can't do it as frequently as the business evolves. And then you think, okay, if I'm only going to do it once a year or once every 2 years, because I have 96 questions, and boy, I don't want to do it in late February because we just did our focal point adjustments for comp and we're going to have some people that are mad, but I can't do it in early summer because that's when everyone is getting ready to go out and no one will fill it out. And I'm going to measure my vanity metric of how many people participated in the survey as if that matters one iota. And then, no, I can't do it in the fall because, that's college football season and we have a lot of folks down in SEC country. Like you end up, the moon is in Taurus. You make these crazy assessments as to when you want to deliver the survey. What's a better way? Fewer questions more frequently, and then you can create a heat map as you're kind of going through time. And if you roll out a new survey or a new process or a new product, or you have some broader organizational changes, now you can see where you have management that requires additional support versus if you do something once a year, like you don't get any of that stuff. And I would even argue, thank you for listening to my TED talk on this point. I would get to the end of my 96 questions and I've just like pencil whipped the last 70 of them. I haven't given it the same thought I did at the very beginning. So I would even argue the data isn't valid. I don't know. Tell me where I'm wrong on this one, Scott.
Well, you're not wrong, but what I'll try and do is add a helpful point that you didn't include, which is that every employee that's out there that takes one of these surveys wants to see one simple thing come out of it: action. They want some kind of effect. I took your stupid survey. I did your 96 questions. Show me now what you're going to do with that information. And I think it gets to the point of ridiculum when you ask all of these questions and the very next quarter, not a single thing has changed in the organization. And this is why I think that the 6 questions is enough, because do you care that somebody has a best friend at work if they don't know what they're coming in to do every day? Nobody cares about
Here
that.
we go. Here we go. The R squared on that question is so dang high, but I think we use it wrong. It is the best predictor of retention that you can have out there. The challenge is not all retention is necessary or good. So if you were to take I have a best friend at work and apply it to those folks you've defined as top talent, A players in critical roles. Now I have something that tells me I have relationships I need to go work on, and that might actually deliver some team building stuff that otherwise I wouldn't think to go do. But broadly speaking, you are 100% correct, in my view at least.
And it's an order of operation too. I care that people have friends. By the way, I have a best friend at work. Thanks for doing the podcast with me. But you don't care about that if there are other more foundational things that are missing. You care about those first.
Yeah.
So if you can get 100% of the people saying, "I totally get why I'm here, why that matters. My boss gets it. I'm being measured fairly. I've got the tools that I need." If those questions are coming out and they're in the 90s, great. Now let's move on to stuff with like a more refined scalpel, and let's figure out some of the other things that drive happiness in the organization, because now we've got the ones that drive engagement.
Sure. And I might even say it comes back to what do you do with the data? So uh, I've worked in companies where this is an executive leadership team approach. We will come up with the 3 to 5 things that we will put on the chart, and we'll talk about it at the town hall, and we will feel very, very good about ourselves, as if we are the Delphi Oracle that have come down and shared with the proletariat what we're going to be doing. Like, that is so stupid. I don't even know how to explain why at some point I thought it was a good idea. What's the right thing to go do? If you have a question, and you and I haven't talked yet. I've written on this. I've done a couple podcasts on it by myself on what's the right kind of human capital scorecard. One of them is clarity of expectations, and it is in fact just ask that very first Gallup question. I know what is expected of me at work, because what will happen is you know exactly what to do with that at all levels of the organization. If I'm a frontline leader and I have a number, I go to my team and I go on a listening tour, and I try to understand what is it that caused us to not have a high score. What does having a high score look like to you? And where are we missing relative to that standard? That is where you find out whether you have a leadership connection problem. It's where you find out where you have an internal client connection problem. And there are actions that come from that are easily owned at the level where the survey is being done.
Yeah, 100%. And, Jackson, one thing that I think a lot of managers make mistakes on is they don't think about the difference between tasks and outcomes. Let me give you an example. I've used this example before. I can't remember whether it's with you and me or not, but like, let's say that we've got a senior accountant, right? And we tell that person, your job is to follow up on delinquent accounts. First of all, like, how are they going to answer the question? Yes, I guess I know what's expected of me, right? But there's a difference between telling somebody that what's expected is a set of mundane tasks and connecting them to something that is much bigger and much more important. Because nobody, like, if we come back to the definition of engagement, it's commitment to help the organization achieve the outcomes that it's trying to achieve. And you can't be committed to that if what you're being told and the understanding you have is about a task that relates to your job. So the reason we tell that accountant follow up on delinquent accounts is that the business needs to reduce days outstanding. And in a $10 million ARR business, reducing days outstanding from 90 to 60 has almost $1 million worth of value to it from cash acceleration. And so that's a meaningful outcome. So when we say know what's expected at work, it's knowing the outcomes. It's not knowing the tasks. It's not like I need you to sit at your desk and do this drudgery. Why does that matter? What's the end that those means accomplish? That's what we need to help people understand.
So let me test one more twist on this, and then we'll move to the wrap up. One of the things that I see with more satisfaction versus engagement surveys as well is it can be gamed by the employee population, especially in places where you have limited trust, especially in places where you have managers that are not driving accountability through their organizations. Like, have you seen that? And if so, how have you tried to manage around that?
Well, I mean, I don't think that the method varies a lot. Yes, I've seen it. And there was something really significant that I want to make sure everybody heard in what you said, which is especially when there's an absence of trust. Like, I think the biggest reason that I dislike engagement surveys is it's like trying to drive the car looking in the rearview mirror. And what we need to do is look forward and address those things that build trust. When you think about it, if what we're trying to achieve is commitment, which is the effectively definition of engagement, and we go out there and we're super clear with here are the outcomes that are important for the business that I'd like to give you accountability for. Here's how I'm going to measure your success on those. There are going to be no mysteries. Not only do you get the opportunity to have people be clear, but you build trust along the way. And that trust almost invalidates, like, why do you even need an engagement survey? If you do those things and you're building that trust, you're naturally going in the right direction and you're looking out the windshield rather than in the rearview mirror. And so what I've tried to do is, rather than focus on let's build a big survey, it's focus on that very, very small, straightforward, but difficult to achieve proposition, which is let's give everybody clarity about their role.
Yeah. I don't know if you've picked up on this, folks out in podcast land, but outcome orientation seems to be a theme from Scott and I. It is the organizational wonder drug. If you have clarity up front, then you have the ability to drive a lot of positive momentum and deliver great business performance. If you are challenged by that, if you are focused on activities versus outcomes, and there's a lack of clarity there, I think you run into issues. So one of the things we do about this time in every podcast is we give a signal to anyone who might be multitasking that we're about ready to do the summary. So this is, in fact, your summary. Here's what we talked about today: engagement scores. We talked that it's important to make sure that they are linked to business outcomes, not just to broad emotional impact. We talked a little bit about the importance of executional simplicity, that fewer questions with more girth are more impactful than a ton of questions that you can't do as frequently as you need to, given the pace of the business. We talked about actionality at the manager level as being super important. I think that was about it. Did I miss anything on that, Scott?
I think you got it. Great summary. We need
Great.
sound effects, man, for the people who are multitasking. When you say it's the summary, we need a sound effect for that.
Okay, I'll have my production intern working on that. By the way, I'm the production intern. I'm learning how to do this all.
You understand what's expected.
Exactly. So, well, that is all we have to say about engagement scores. So to wrap this up, please know that we are very grateful that you joined us today. And thank you for listening for just a few minutes. And we hope that you found value here. And if you did, please share it with others who might also find value from it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're now on YouTube and Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't given us a 5-star review, that is how we end up getting more people seeing the pod. And if you can't give a 5-star review, just forget I said anything, please. If you do want to explore more on these topics, head on over to my Substack. That's at talentsherpa.substack.com. That's where we dive deeper and provide more insights into navigating the future of work. We're also working on a brand new, larger ecosystem at mytalentsherpa.com. So if you have a moment, please check out the offerings there. And don't forget to visit Scott at getpropulsion.ai, where you can talk about how he can help you in focusing on the outcomes and get some of the administrivia off of your HRBPs. And again, thanks for listening to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is, in fact, where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. So until next time, stay clear, measure smarter, and keep on climbing.